Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with our final race in the Manufacturers Championship in the official season of 2019. So this final race was at Catalunya. I'm driving Ford, the Group 3 Ford GT for the final time. I will not be using this car for the upcoming season. Managed to end this season with a reasonable qualifying. I was a bit frustrated with race 1. We actually, the first race of the day with high points available, I qualified P2. Got myself in the lead, then braked randomly too early, got back into P2, but tried the wrong strategy. I wasn't aware that the pit lanes were much shorter in terms of distance during this race until obviously I saw what happened during the race. But for this race, managed to qualify P3 with not a particularly great qualifying lap again. It wasn't as good as my lap I did in the slot 1, and the slot 1 qualifying wasn't even perfect as well. So was reasonably happy with P3 in qualifying. However, this lobby, as per usual with the final race of the day, had quite a few disconnections. I believe it was 4 or 3 disconnections. I think it might have been 3 and then someone just left because the points were pointless. Literally no point racing because they dropped down massively. It's a shame. This has happened quite a few times to me this season, especially when I've had a decent car. I've got decent results in lobbies where we've had disconnections and the points just drop down. So hopefully they can get on top of this issue. It seems like an issue that's come back into the game. You'll see I think we only had 16 cars in this race you see there. One car I believe obviously did just disconnect after they seen the disconnection, so I think 2 or 3 of them were just purely from the game disconnecting as the game loads up, and then that drops the points down. I think this lobby probably would have been a 2.7 version on a 2.8k lobby race, but because of the deduction it was down to about 2.5 I believe, something really low like that. But we're going to try and have some fun in this final race. A podium would be great for our first final race back in the final race for this season. Driving forward, you can see the slipstream we're getting down the main straight and looking like we're going to be able to have a little look at that FT1. So Rick has gone defensive on that right hand side. I'm going to try and brake as late as possible in the Ford GT. That FT1, very good brakes on it though, is able to brake very, very late, giving each other just enough space there through the corner and then tucking back into that slipstream and trying to take a tight line. I was going to try and undercut him here, but the rear got a little bit loose. You can see battling behind me between that Jaguar and Porsche as we go into the right hand corner. Very tricky corner again. You've got to be very careful. I like to take a very tight mind to apex. We actually got a little nudge from behind from the Porsche there, which kind of unsettled the car all the way through the corner, but managed to get the car over to the left hand side to go defensive on this apex. And again, it's very hard for a car to go around the outside, particularly the Porsche. It's not really got the straight line speed to go around there in terms of out accelerate the Ford GT. So managed to hold on to the P3 position in this race at the start, which was quite lucky really. We got a bit loose going through the first section when you were very close to another car through there. It's very hard when you're in the slipstream. Obviously Catalunya, and again another track that will affect the way the car handles quite badly when you're in a slipstream as we go into the braking zone. It does look like that Audi R8 in the lead, driven by Tijani there, is able to actually build a bit of a lead up over the FT1. That's not a massive surprise, although the FT1 is probably quite a solid car, as is the Ford GT. The Audi R8 is probably the strongest car for Catalunya. I believe when we did the time trial it was pretty much the best car overall to use in terms of its hot lapping pace, and the fact that this race was a pit stop race kind of helped that Audi R8 out, because if it wouldn't have been a pit stop race I think it would have struggled quite a bit towards the end of the race. But with the fact that you could jump in the pits either like 4 or 5, put a fresh set of tyres on, it meant that car was going to be very strong in this race. However, in the Ford GT, one downside you can see I'm having to do fuel saving. You'll see that throughout the whole of this race, doing a fair bit of short shifting and mixture 2 usage through some of these corners. Now the mixture 2 usage I kind of tried to do tactically to reduce the amount of short shifting I had to do on the straight. So this is going to help preserve the tyres on the rear of the car. Obviously the Ford GT is not the strongest on tyres, so that's why I'm using mixture 2 in certain areas of the track. And also it's going to save a bit of fuel, because the Ford GT could not run this race driving it as fast as you can, basically using all the revs to the end. It would run out of fuel it would be quite a few. I think it would be over a lap short in terms of fuel, so you had to do a fair amount of short shifting. You'll see I'm revving it, changing gear a little bit earlier than what you would tend to do with this Ford GT, because the Ford GT likes to be revved very aggressively. For example, in Third gear, you'd rev it all the way up to like 118, 119 miles an hour. You can see I'm short shifting there into fourth gear. Before I come out the exit of the corner there, that's also going to help preserve the tyres as well. So it's not the worst car in acceleration when you do that short shift there, but in general this car does like to be aggressively driven, so it wasn't the strongest for fuel. This is one criticism I had of this car over the official FIA season, was the fuel, like the lack of fuel saving ability with this car. You can see, I think probably the only car that had to do reasonably aggressive fuel saving throughout this race was the Ford GT. I think the Porsche, Audi, I'm not sure about the FT1, I don't really know what that car's like on fuel. I believe it's okay, and the Jaguar behind, etc., were able to run this race pretty much, I wouldn't say 100% flat maybe, but just a tiny bit of short shifting. I very much doubt they would have had to have used mixture 2 to try and preserve the fuel. As again, I'm back into that mixture 2 before we get to the end of the straight, because obviously it's going to save that little bit of fuel as we're going maximum speed into the braking zone, and again it's going to help my tyres all the way through this section. And at the moment, just about hanging on to Rick in P2 there. I say Rick, but that's his old name, obviously. Managing to stay fairly close to slipstream. Obviously the new slipstream that is on this game now is a little bit aggressive. It's 1.3 seconds, so if you're within 1.3 seconds you will pick up quite a nice draft, as it looks like Rick might have made a mistake on that corner there, so we gained a massive amount of time through there. It looks like he had a little moment maybe on the rear end which lost him half a second or so, but TGT out in front, able to build that lead up and looking very, very solid for a victory in this race. But at the moment it's looked like quite a strong battle between P2, P3, myself and P4, and also Jomas just lingering in the background behind the other Jaguar that's right behind me as we go again to finish lap 3 and start lap 4. Now lap 4 was going to be the lap that I would pit on, obviously after finding out in the first race that this was a pit stop race. This was my third race. The second race we had a disaster, we just didn't run it very well. We did a bad qualifying, got all aggressive, we made a mistake on lap 1 as well. We bumped into the rear 4, so had to let him back through, and it was just a bit of a disaster that race. So unfortunately missed out on points in that race as well, and I think I had the potential to get a top 2 again in that race. So this race was the final chance to really get ourselves onto the podium and see what sort of result we can get as we go again down that main straight. It's still just about in the slipstream. You're going to see also the Jaguar behind flashing his lights. That's not to say he's going to go for an overtake. That is, I could tell the way he was doing it, and there's a difference. You can see he's doing it to say he's not going to go for an overtake, because he probably knows if he goes for an overtake we're going to lose time to P2, and then Jomas is going to get right in on the action as well and put him on the pressure. So probably a little bit tactical that he wants to try and maintain on and hold on to that P4 ahead of Jomas by keeping the slipstream to my car all the way down that main straight. As we again looking at the replay camera just how close this racing is from P2. It's very, very close. P2 in that FT1, just a little bit of a gap to myself. TGT again got quite a strong gap over the FT1, but behind that pretty much it's the slipstream effect, where we have that gap from about between half second to 1 second between most cars when they struggle to really be able to make an overtake. Obviously the Jaguar very strong in terms of that fight, the long straight when it's in the slipstream, and obviously I think the Jaguar may have been pretty decent on tyres around here. I'm not 100% sure. It would have used up the front tyres, however it would have kept the rear tyres better. So contradicting to the Ford GT that uses the rears but looks after the fronts better. That's why with the Ford GT I always tended to run -5 brake bias to help look after them rear tyres for the traction zones. But it did drive extreme. I have to say the Ford GT was very nice around this track. I did enjoy driving it. I felt like I could get in the zone with it. It felt comfortable to drive, the way it would swing through the corners. It was just a shame that we had to do that little bit of fuel saving on certain areas track and a little bit of short shifting. So we're now going to jump into the pits. Lap 4, you'll see everyone doing this, or the majority of people doing it. Some people were still trying to do the no stop, which after the first race I realised was not the way to go for the Ford GT. There are other cars that probably could do it that have better fuel consumption and also were a bit tighter on the tyres, but Ford GT was a real effort to do it. So you can see with this new pit lane loss, don't lose a massive amount of time. I think it was only like 8 or 9 seconds or something like that. So it makes sense really to change them tyres, and then you're going to be a couple of seconds a lap for 5, probably maybe a second or so at this stage, but then towards the end of the race you're going to be over 2 seconds a lap faster, probably 2 to 3 seconds a lap faster with the Ford GT. and that brings back the pit stop and just gives you the more solid drive on the final few laps. As again, you can see Rick actually gained out of that pit stop a fair amount. He seemed to have gained about 3 or 4 attempts maybe. Maybe he had a faster entry into the pits. I know that can affect your pit stop distance sometimes, the time it takes sometimes. Not 100% sure, but you can see that Tidgeny, I think Tidgeny actually, did he actually manage to get into the lead? No, he actually came out on P2, so Tidgeny jumped P3 there, so Rick has to overtake one of the cars that is doing the no stop, and I'm going to have to overtake Matty as well, but he's only got, Tidgeny has only got to overtake Doffra in that GTR, which could be a bit of a, might be quite difficult to overtake him on acceleration, but I'm guessing that the Audi's ability through the corners and into the braking with fresh tyres on will not really be a trouble for that Audi R8. And I don't think Doffra would defend too hard. He probably knows that his race is more with the no stoppers rather than the people that have just pitted, as we now go to start that lap 6. Only a few laps to go obviously in this race. And again, this season was very short in the races. It's really nice to see that they have listened to criticism of the race distance, and we are looking at a much more enjoyable season, I believe, for the next FIA season. There's going to be strategy involved, there's going to be pit stops, there's going to be possible 2-stop strategies. It's really interesting, and I like the way it's looking so far. I'm really excited to see how this new season pans out with other races and strategies and stuff. I think we could be watching some very good races and being involved with some very interesting tactical races as well. But at the moment in this race, you can see obviously that Jaguar is still lurking in that background. You can see Rick has managed to get past the Lexus driven by Matty there in P4. So that is the next car I've got to try and get past. I need to try and be able to get as close as possible, because I've got to try and make sure I make the move on Matty on the main straight. That's pretty much the only place you can go for a solid overtake at Catalunya, especially at this stage. I think if it would have been towards the end, you could maybe go for a move elsewhere, because the tyre wear would be affecting that Lexus a little bit more. But on lap 6, the tyre wear is still probably enough to give him reasonable grip through this section of the track. You can see he is slower, he is losing on traction zones and accelerating out through corner apex speeds, etc. But it's not enough to really dive right up the back of his gearbox and get a move done. So you can see now accelerating behind in the slipstream. We're going to brake just on that the warning sign for the yellow flag and the blue flag, and then into first gear. Very long first gear, this Ford GT. Sometimes it can hinder you. It actually I like the way it was able to go into first gear for that hairpin. It seemed to help me out as we get massive traction from that corner, obviously with them fresher tyres now, and we're in a good position to get myself up into P4. You can see also Rick getting held up by Doffra there in the GTR. Obviously Doffra, not really, I think he was just driving his normal line through the handling section, and then he wasn't battling it too hard on the main straight. But obviously that GTR so fast down the straights, that FT1 is going to have to go for a lunge really to make that move work. But with Matty and the Lexus in front, you can see he's not going to defend again. He's going to drive it very sensibly, not really going to try and brake too late. Gives me the inside line, I tuck in, he's then going to duck in behind me and try and get the slipstream to help his race out. As you can see, he's getting very close to the GTR there in front, so maybe his aim was to jump that GTR somehow with better tyre wear and picking up slipstreams from other cars. But you can see Doffra also didn't battle that too hard to Rick in the FT1. So this race was actually reasonably exciting, because some people were trying the one stop, some people were trying the no stop. Again, it would have been better though if it would have been like 17 laps or 16 laps, etc. I think it would have been a lot more exciting with possibly a divide between one stop and two stop. That probably would have been how it would have worked. As we now go into the braking zone again, trying to figure out where we're going to get past this Nissan GTR, because this GTR is probably the fastest car I've ever come across on Gran Turismo Sport in Group 3 in terms of acceleration. It is unbelievable when that car it pours from corners like nothing else on the game. It's not particularly the best in traction when tyres start to wear, so I was aware of that. As you can see, I'm trying to make sure he can see me. He knows that I want to get past. I'm trying to make my car viewable as we go a little bit wide there, but as long as I stay with him a few attempts. The Ford GT is also quite a strong car down the straight, so I was pretty confident that if I can just get in the slipstream, get into 6th gear, get a tiny bit of slipstream to tow me along in 6th, and then go for that move on the inside, I was pretty sure that Doffra wouldn't really defend too aggressively, because there'd be no benefit to that. As you see the Jaguar getting so close behind me there, getting very aggressive now. People obviously trying to consider their moves now to make up positions in this race the last few laps. You kind of want to now go for it and try and get as far up the field as you can. As we're going to go in 6th gear briefly, you see there, pick a bit of slipstream up, pull out, go into the braking zone and outbrake the GTR with the fresher tyres. Not much that Dofra could really do in terms of defence there, and back up into P3 in this race. But you can see with the traffic, I kind of lost out quite badly to Rick in the FT1 there. He was able to gap that quite a bit there. You can see it was only about 1.5, I believe, as we were in the traffic, and at one point I think we were only about 1.2, 1.3 seconds behind. But then obviously Dofra, I got held up a bit there through the handling section and lost quite a big chunk of time to Rick, and that shows you just how much faster the fresher tyres were over the worn tyres. It really does show the difference. But now we're going to have the Jaguar, who's got past that GTR a lot faster. He's really gone aggressive with that move. Obviously I think Dofra now starting to really struggle, and the two Jaguars are behind me realised they could not afford to really sit behind. They had to make that move, because if they would have got held up behind this section here, they would have been they would have had pretty much no chance of getting back into the slipstream, I believe, as we go into the braking again for this left-hand corner. Again, that first gear, really, I did enjoy this car with first gear, because the way you could do it was just accelerate briefly at first, upshift early into second, and then it got nice traction out of that corner. But still having to do, you can see I'm still having to do short shifting with this car. I can't ref it fully because obviously the fuel, I've done a reasonably good job with the fuel though, obviously keeping the short shifting and the mixture control to get myself to the end of this race as we go over through the final corner for the penultimate time, and then starting the final lap now with just about 1.1 laps of fuel. We're going to go over the line pretty much dead on the fuel I need. I could actually push a little bit more aggressively, so revving it out a bit on this straight to make sure that I'm not going to become under threat. You can see the Jaguar is too far back though as we go into that braking, and at this point now it's pretty much a case of just hanging on to P3. So mixture 2, try and make sure we don't make any spins on the rear, trying to look after the car, because obviously this is the 5-lap stint. The tyres are going to be a bit more warm than they were on that first stint, and I haven't actually driven this second stint brilliant, but it's hard to judge how well we've driven it really because of the traffic on the second stint. The first stint was the best lap of the race, however I got traffic on the laps with the fresh tyres, so it's hard to judge how well I drove this second stint, obviously because I lost a lot of time behind the Lexus and also the GTR, and didn't really gain that much really, because the only bit of time we gained was in the slipstream, but then we had to take an awkward line into the braking zone. So I think we lost quite a bit in that stage, so it's really hard really to judge anywhere where we were in terms of the second stint. But just now trying to keep it nice and smooth, going through these corners for the final time now in this race, and our final ever drive in the Ford GT. I was really wanting to get a good result for my final drive, and I think I did a reasonably job in this. I think I could have drove it a little bit better than what I did. Obviously I think maybe if we would have been a bit more aggressive and tried to get past some the back markers a bit quicker, but it's so hard when you're behind a car like the GTR that is so fast on acceleration, and you don't want to pick up a penalty. So I think I did pretty much all I could do. I don't think I had the pace to beat Rick anyway. I think his pace on the second stint was much stronger. I think he did a bit of fuel saving maybe in the first stint, so we could drive the second stint flat out as we go over the line and finish in P3. A nice podium finish, a reasonably decent finishing time for the Ford GT as well of I think it's 16 minutes 7 seconds or something like that. I'm considering we started from P3 as well, that's not bad at all. So I was reasonably happy with that. I think that was the fastest time I'd finished it in practice, because we hadn't really practiced a one-stop strategy, so that was the way to go with the Ford GT. Luckily got that result at the end, and only 2.2, just under 2.3k points. Again, that was because of the disconnections. If we wouldn't have had the disconnections, that result would have been probably worth 2.5k points, which is a shame. But anyway, we end the season with Ford GT with a podium, happy with that, and we move on now to the next season, where we're going to have to get back into the zone of consistency drive and much longer races, 25 to 30 minute races, much more enjoyable, getting back into the strategy element of these races as well. It's been a long time since we've really had to, I know this race had a pit stop, but it's been a long time before we've had multiple strategies that could work in terms of a one stop or a two stop. So this is going to be an interesting season to watch. I hope you, the viewers, enjoy the upcoming season. I will be streaming the majority of races that I can, so check them out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and click the notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone.